Okay, well, welcome everybody. So glad you could join us today. To get us in the volunteer mindset here, let's warm up the chat with a little starter question. Tell me, what is your top characteristic you like to see in a volunteer? When you see that aha volunteer, what does that person act like, do, what's a characteristic for that person, your top performing volunteer? Go ahead and put that in chat so we can kind of start thinking about what are we aspiring to here. They have follow through. Yes, Joshua, for sure. Commitment, reliability. Oh, we got a couple consistencies right in a row. Very engaged, flexible and understanding. Yes, don't we like those volunteers who get it? They can roll with the punches. Another follow through. Awesome, awesome. Collaborative, dependable. Yeah, you always one of the ones that you can go back to because you know they're going to get the work done. And alignment with association values. Yeah, excellent, excellent, excellent. These are all great characteristics of what we would like to see in a high performing volunteer. So keep those coming in. Here's your second warm up question for the chat. So we'll get the chat going. Describe a successful short term volunteer activity your association has offered. So we're all about the short term volunteer activities. What is a successful short term volunteer activity your association has offered? Program selection committee. And review committees. Those are really popular short-term ones, right? Drop in, do some reviews, get out. Those are awesome. Calling expired members. Oh, I love that. Excellent. Planning an educational session, uh, hosting panels, judging awards. Yep, awards programs, review committees, awards. Those are always popular one. Panels, presenting. Task force that responds to the need or interest of the board. Yep, we've always got to have those task force out there. Attend a leaders orientation. Yep, planning meetings. Coffee calls. Ooh, a 30-minute virtual trainings. Chip, coffee calls. I love that. I might steal that idea. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, any last ideas on short term? I think we're ready to get going, right, Peggy?
Yeah, let's go ahead and put the first slide up.
So, Peggy, I think you're going to go first, and then I'm going to go follow you and
Yes.
then dive into our plan.
Yeah, so we're inviting you, welcoming you one more time to our part one of our two-part staff liaison program. Many of you are joining us for part two, but part one has got a lot of critical, important information. I'm Peggy Hoffman with Mariner Management. I have been in the association business long enough to stop telling you how long I've been in the association business, but I am a serial volunteer. And I have to tell you that I'm doing one volunteer role right now with ASAE, where we're rewriting the chapter on redefining member engagement for the fifth edition of the professional practices textbook. And it's really exciting talking to volunteers about how we have shifted that. But my fun volunteer experience was choreographer for the middle school plays, being with the kids, teaching them how to do moves. That was probably by ever, that was my most favorite volunteer program. Christine, what
Oh,
about you?
I love that, Peggy. Working with your community and especially kids, that's great. Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Metter. I am a consultant in the association space. Had my own business for a few years now, but before that, I was on staff and senior staff positions for both professional societies and trade associations. Like Peggy, I'm not going to tell you exactly how many years because it's getting too many to count. But I have probably had just about every role you can imagine in an association. But what do I love the most? It's working with volunteers. They really are the lifeblood of all of our associations and allow us to get done so much more than we can on our own just for the staff. So I'm always thrilled when I get to join Peggy and talk about volunteers and how we can support them. My fun volunteering experience is that I used to be a runner, don't run anymore, but I still love going out to running races that support a charity. And I go with a group of friends. We do a water point. So we hand out the water to the runners as they go by. And I just love it because it's a great energy, can cheer along the volunteers. I can drop in just for the day. It's a short term, it's a group activity. And it's a charity that I usually care about that when I'm going out there. So that's a great example of how, you can really combine something that's what we might be doing in our association world, that short-term group activity, but you can do it in the personal world too, and just make it fun. So we are here to talk about volunteers today. And so we thank you for taking 75 minutes out of your busy, busy schedules to talk about the importance of volunteers in your association and their link to member engagement and how you can make the most of that relationship between you as the staff and your volunteers. But ultimately, what we're really looking for is a positive experience for both sides, both for you and for the volunteer. So, how are we going to do that? What are we going to do today? We are going to put this into about 4 or 5 big buckets. First, we're going to touch on some research about today's volunteer, kind of give you that grounding there. Then we're going to explore the basic roles and skills you need to effectively serve as liaisons to volunteers. We're going to outline some common challenges that you might see when you're working with volunteer groups. And we kind of group those into 2 areas, the unengaged volunteer and disruptive behaviors. So you might see a little bit of talk around there. And these are in situations where associations really haven't yet put together a strong structure to support you or the volunteers when we see those come along. Peggy's going to introduce to you some the 5 roles of a staff liaison. That's going to be real concrete takeaways that you can have. And we're going to provide you with an action worksheet to start applying what you learned today. So before we dive into all of that content, though, we want to hear a little bit about you first. So we're going to have a series of chat questions and polls for you to answer so we can kind of get to know each other and get to know you a little bit better. So first chat question is, um, uh, where do you volunteer? Where do you personally volunteer? And it could be professionally, it could be in your community, it could be in your school. So where do you volunteer right now? So just pop that into the chat. So somebody's a chaperone for marching band. Wow. I remember doing the marching band trips. Those were great. I always loved the parents who came. You volunteered at your condo, a museum, your local public library, for ASAE, museums. Oh, lots of museums. That's great. The PTO, school, the church, the animal shelter, an association board, an HOA, lots of condo boards, HOA boards. Yep. Another association, a certified gardener. Sabrina, I need to talk to you after this session. I have a couple questions for my yard that I need to know more about. So the whole point here though is that wow, look at how volunteering can take so many different shapes and forms and supports all kinds of organizations and community activities. So, the breadth of volunteering really is very substantial and kind of just really encompass so many different activities. So great. Thanks for putting that in there. Okay. Now we've got our first poll question that Peggy's going to pop up here for us. And it is, what types of volunteer opportunities does your association offer? So you're going to see on here that we've got things like board and committee and task force. And I bet for the 39 people that are on the call today, you'd have 39 definitions for some of these different activities. But kind of think about your components. Think about chapters and SIGs. And for committees, think about those longer term. We've got some definitions in parentheses there to kind of help you identify those. So we've got, wow, it's pretty even here all the way across. We've got um, lots of board activity, lots of committees. So most people, we got about 26 in, couple more people to come. Wanda, you do all of them? Yep. You name it, you've got to volunteer for it. So, Peggy, we gonna leave it open for just another second
Yeah, we're just
or?
about, the popcorn's got just a few more pops. I can hear it.
Okay.
3. There we go. 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
So you can see that right at the top, boards, committees, task forces, pretty much everybody. And then the project volunteers, those are the most common. We see a little bit of a drop off with some of the components, and then a little bit less so with the micro or other. So most of you are covering most of the volunteer types of activities that we see commonly in associations. So great. So we got some commonality there. Okay. So
Christine, I'm sorry, what's kind of interesting is, now I know we've got a number of people from the same organization, but we do a good job here, but research tells us that the preferred volunteering is in the project and one-up option. So it's interesting that we've got the traditional covered, but yet the research suggests we should spend a little bit more time on the other ones. Just
we,
wanted to throw that
we
out
might
there.
have to peel that onion a little bit later on here at the end of the session
Yes.
here. Great observation. Thanks, Peggy. Okay, folks, next question. It's a chat one. So we're going back to chat. Put into chat, how would you describe your volunteer liaison role or roles, plural? You, of course, can have more than one. And let me give you some examples. You might say, I support a board or a committee or a component. You might say you work or manage with project volunteers. You might say you generally manage the volunteer program. So how would you, in a word or a short phrase, describe your volunteer role or roles that you might have at your association? Manage chapters and committees. Brian, yep, awesome. Lead a committee. Yes, Jennifer, board and committee liaison. Kelly, supporter chapters, bridge to HQ. Bridge, that's an important point there. Absolutely. Support chapters, committees, facilitate your annual. Oh, it's going so fast here. I keep it up here. Support committees, executive liaisons, facilitate annual call for volunteers, local chapters. Joshua, the question is, how would you describe your volunteer liaison role or roles? How would you describe that? A word or a short phrase? So I serve on a council, volunteer management, recruitment, boards, general program management. Wanda, yes. Committee liaison. I'm the chapter volunteer and national board doing volunteer tasks and working with staff on Kathy. Wow, that is a lot you've got going on there all at once. You might be tired a little bit. So awesome, awesome, awesome. So what you can see here again is that there's the breadth of what being a liaison could look like, right? There's some consistency, there's some common with the boards and committees, but there's all kinds of different things that you might be doing as a liaison. And so, this means that you might have a little bit flavor, different flavor, depending on what you're working on. But as a liaison, here's the bottom line. You are responsible for creating an environment where your volunteers can and will be successful in the volunteer activity. So kind of put a little pin in that. Keep that in mind as we go through today's session and talk about it. Okay, last poll here. Peggy, if you can put up our second poll. So this one is, have you encountered any or all of these volunteer situations? So you'll see a variety of volunteer situations in here. So kind of pop in here. You can have multiples of these. And we picked these into the pick list for the poll for a reason that these are kind of common that you see across many associations. And if you experience this, you're probably not alone. It's one of the things we want to make sure that you hear loud and clear about this. The other thing is that these pop up a lot of times when association hasn't really invested in strong support systems for the volunteers or for you, right? So this is when you can kind of see some problematic situations start to arrive with some of these volunteers here. Peggy, we're 30, we're pretty close to done here.
Yeah, pretty close. I don't see anything else coming in.
Okay.
Now, I wanted to mention that we didn't put none of the above. And we, and I say that because if any of you have not clicked any of this and it's because you're not experiencing them, we would love to hear a tip or two from you in chat about that. But here's the results.
Right. So as I said, these are common, and sure enough, most everybody here had almost all of these issues that have come up at some point in working with volunteers. They stop responding, they show up, but they don't really participate. They are sometimes rude, argumentative, interrupting. So, kind of bad behavior that we might see. So, we're going to address some of these as we go through this as you're thinking about your volunteer liaison role. And that's what we really want to start talking about. So, why did we go through this series of chat and poll questions here? Well, one, we wanted to show you the breadth of volunteering. And yes, we really do know that your association is unique, but we wanted to establish this baseline of understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about working with volunteers and how you can support them. And while your association, I'm going to say it again, is indeed unique, there are common challenges that most associations experience. We hope this grounding really helps you to position your work in supporting volunteers as you think about how you do this within the context of all your association's activities. So really kind of think about how this grounding keeps going as we move into we're talking about your specific roles. Okay, one more thing that we want to do here before we jump into Peggy going through the roles is talk a little bit about the research and what it says about effective volunteer systems. And we included into the advanced materials that were sent to you both an article and a video. Hopefully, you had a chance to at least skim them. Maybe you watched the video on 1.5 speed so you could get through it. But it had quite a bit of information in here about what several research resources have come out of the ASAE Research Foundation, a number of which the Mariner team has worked on over the years. So, what we would like to hear from you is when you read the article or listened to the video, what was the aha that you had from reading the article or listening to the video? So, what was an aha item? Put that into chat from the advanced materials. Yeah. So, yeah, that the organization has not done enough. Chip, you're 100% right. That is for sure something. A feedback loop. That is so important, Mary Kate. Excellent. Excellent. Oh, Stephen, I do love that. The organization-wide culture in support of volunteerism, right? It's not just the member services team or the volunteer team that's responsible. Everybody needs to be supporting volunteers for sure. Any other aha moments for when you read the article or watched the video? We've got a couple of people who are joining with Stephen. Yep, it's that culture. Absolutely. Staff will only be interested in training if they understand how it benefits them. Absolutely, right? You got to do the with them. What's in it for them, right? So always make sure that you explain why it's important, it's valuable to take the time to work on that. Absolutely, absolutely.
And Christine, we actually wrote a report on that, didn't we? On
Motivations, right?
on the motivations for learning, particularly when it comes to volunteering. We should maybe drop that link in the chat at some point.
Absolutely. So let me flip the question here. And when you read the article or watched the video, what questions popped into your mind? What was you kind of left saying, I'd like to hear more of, or wasn't really clear on, or you just like to hear a little bit more about? Any questions that popped in your mind when you took a look at the advanced materials? Put that into chat. Everything was crystal clear, Peggy. I think they're thinking about it.
I think part of this question could also be, what didn't you see that you still have a question about?
There you go. Yeah. Kind of turn the question around. Love that.
Well, please feel free to use chat to put that question in. If any questions come up as we go, we will be referencing all of these. And at the end, you will get links to all of these if you've missed the links along the way.
Well, let me just close out my
Oh,
section, Peggy, and just
Cicely
say,
has something.
oh, okay. I'm wondering about ways to diversify volunteer pool. Yes, the pipeline is always a challenge, right? So we'll see if we can touch on that a little bit. And Stephen wants to better understand the volunteers' motivation to get involved and help them stay involved. So Stephen, look at that link that Carol Blateau just put in the chat there. That's the link to our article. It talks a little bit about volunteer motivations. That might help you out there a little bit.
Yeah.
Peggy, I'm going to hand it off to you, but I'm going to say that my ha-ha from the research was that staff are really critical to support the volunteer system. You know, it's like we assume that it's a volunteer system, but staff are such an important piece of it too. It's like two interlocking puzzle pieces. So that's definitely an aha for me. What about you?
I think that probably the two most important ahas to me coming out of that research, and candidly, Mariner was a lead researcher in two of these products, but it was how volunteers as well as staff crave assessment. And assessment is really critical to an effective program. And I thought that was really interesting because that's kind of there's an orthodoxy that volunteers don't really want to be assessed, but they told us in both research is important, and the inability to define effective in the second research, everybody said to us, it's because we don't assess it, so we're not really sure. But the other part I think that was really a little bit of a surprise, and I'm going to just echo what you said, Christine, is what the outsized impact almost is that staff can have on the volunteer satisfaction. And I always think of it as funny because I think the right volunteers in the room have an incredible impact on our satisfaction as liaisons. So, and it's interesting that whole concept of assessment and the staff role really were highlighted in the first research project, mutually beneficial volunteering system, which gave the definition for what makes an effective volunteer system, the details of which were then teased out in the follow-up research. And when we talk about ways to diversify your volunteer pool and to connect to volunteer motivations, this definition, I think, can be very useful because it talks to us about importance for us to be able to identify what is the contribution a volunteer is making to the association in real terms, in tangible terms, in storytelling. At the same time, being able for us to garner from our volunteers what is the how are we supporting them so that they can do the best and they can be the best that they can be. The research is very rich, and we could spend the time here today on talking about the volunteer management system, but that's the reason why we gave you some of the research materials in advance, was so you could look at those definitions and get a sense of this. But I want to bring back the finding that the critical part of the system really is you. And part of what we want to do is focus on you as opposed to the system today. I do want to address the question of how do I diversify my volunteer pool, and telling you that when we step up to our job, we will step up the opportunity to talk about and shine the positive light on volunteerism, which helps us get the story out more broadly, which helps us bring in new voices and new faces. But what is your job? Let's take a look at what your job is and then take a look at how we can optimize that. So here's my first question for you. As a staff liaison to any kind of a volunteer group, which of these do you have today as part of your job? And it is multiple choice. We're asking, are you a key contact? We're asking you, are you an information resource? Are you a technical resource on the topic or the issue? Are you doing project management? What, if anything, is around building the community of that group? And what, if anything, is your ear for an organization? As you are completing this, go ahead in chat and share maybe a key point or identify an example of how that is part of your role. So anybody can please fill that into chat so we can get a little bit of conversation. We want to talk about how to make your role the best possible for you and the volunteer. So let's find out what's already in your job description, as they say.
Or
Let's
not,
see.
as the
Yeah.
case may be,
Yeah,
Peggy.
so the question is, what is part of your job? When you click project management, what does that mean to you? When you click ear for the organization, what does that mean for you? So let's share in chat some of the ways that you live these buckets that you're checking on. We've got 75% of you are already in. I saw the first couple of folks came in very quickly, so you must be doing some thinking about this. Yes, Stephen, thank you for highlighting that because that's actually we don't understand how we are seen that way by our volunteers. Only sometimes we don't see that as our role. So I love the fact that you brought that out. Oh, and Nicole's doing a yes, I absolutely agree. Uh, Business development. Ah, okay. And
Oh.
Kelly, that's the secret, right? That's the secret to success is to be able to switch your jobs as needed because volunteers will need different things from you. Okay, Roman, you are managing the liaisons. Yeah, so that is a critical element that we heard in both volunteer studies was this notion of that consistency of the experience across the organization. That's a big job, but I am delighted to see that there's someone that's in our midst here who is tackling that. I like this. So Sabrina, am I reading into that comment that you see your role as helping volunteers find their voice? Because if so, I really want to lift that up and star that. That's really a great thing. Great. There are so many good ideas here. Let me show you the results. Most of you checked almost every one of these roles, which is good because we're going to talk about your volunteer liaison role and you're going to hear all of these words again, but from a slightly different perspective. Indeed, I would suggest to you that what the research says and supports is that every one of these is part of your job. Okay, I'm going to take this. I want to ask just a follow-up question and put this in chat. We just talked about what your roles are, but now I want to ask you very specifically, what do you do and not do for your committee? And I want to focus on the not do here. So what are the aspects of your job working with the committee that you have either they've asked you, but you say, this is not my job, or maybe they expected it to be, but you've taught them how to do it yourself. So what do you do and not do for your committee? I know it's a tricky question. But sometimes we think we have to do everything. Yes, okay, Kelly, great, coming right in there. It is not our job to make the decisions. It is our job to facilitate the decisions. It's a little bit of a line there, but we have to understand that. Try not to do custom data reports. Okay, sometimes they can be a little tricky. I get it. What else? Oh, interesting. Deciding on how much time they should each put into the committee. You don't handle logistics or operations. Oh, Mary Kay. See, there isn't hard and fast right or wrongs here. So I like seeing the sequencing here, particularly when someone comes back and says, oh, but I want to do all of that. And so the volunteers can do the fun stuff. All right, let me take this to the next level. That's your committee. What about your chair? So Stephen already addressed, he doesn't make decisions for the committee chairs. Who, or on who to take to the committee, deciding on how much time they should put in the committees. Are there other things that you don't do or you do for the chair? Are there other ways you support the chair or lines that you draw? This takes a little bit more thought.
Want to walk carefully when you're talking about the chair.
Yes, there are no chairs, your chairs are not in this call. Hmm. Yes. And I like, Emily, how you did that juxtaposition. My job is to give them best practices, research, and thoughts. Their job is to come to their best conclusion. Okay. Rachel. Okay, I love this. Sounding board. Yes. All right. I like Julia. I like the way you've parsed that.
Yeah, Leanne, great. You get the chair set up to run the meeting, but they have to run the meeting. So kind of work behind the scenes. That's always a great one.
So, Emily, we should star that and put that into our training on a slide, but don't get offended when they don't do what you think they should. Um,
Yes.
So I'm appreciating all of the comments here. At the same time, because you are the face of the organization to the group of volunteers, and actually more than that, I want you to maybe have a little bit of maybe I just want to say I want you to think a little differently about some of your answers to these questions. What I'm talking about is I'm going to ask you to put a slightly different or a new mindset in on, because it's going to yield better results, right? This new mindset I want you to think of is I want you to step up and give yourself a voice. Somebody mentioned that they are really trying to help their volunteers have the confidence. I want you to have the confidence to not only give some thoughts, but also where necessary to coach where they need it. So to go that slightly extra step, I call it embracing your role as a partner. We are not subservient to our volunteers. We really are a partner. We're a catalyst helping them get the job done. When we embrace this role, our volunteers have more impact. Collectively, we move things forward and we build our own personal satisfaction. There are actually 5 roles for you to embrace on this. And I'm going to go through these, but I do want this to be conversation. So in chat, go ahead if there's a challenge. Go ahead if there's a question. Some of the things are going to match the very things that you put in chat, and some of them are going to go a little bit further. Let's start with your role as key resource. What do I mean by this? Because it's not simply you knowing where stuff is and sending them links. It's not about you putting a lot of stuff in a shared folder. That is part of it. But the step up on that is that you're actually going to match volunteer needs to resources, to people, to things. You're going to get to know your volunteers in a way that you're able to guide them to resources, to information, to policy, to technology, to data, the things that they need to get the job done. This means you're going to put on a little bit of a coaching mindset to be able to help people articulate what they need. It does mean that you need to really understand and know where there are resources. You really do need to be the person they can contact for information. You need to be very clear yourself on the policies. But all of this means that they see you as go-to in the resources, but very importantly, it helps them develop trust in you. When they develop trust in you, you're setting yourself up to have critical conversations and influence where needed. So it's about two things. It's about matching the volunteer leads, and it's about allocating the resources based on that. Now, a huge part of this is taking a lead in orientation, onboarding, and training. I don't want to underestimate how important it is to have a consistent orientation, onboarding, and training for your volunteers. But let's get a little granular about what the difference is between those three elements. Orientation is, generally speaking, a one-up event that says, this is what your job is. These are the rules and the regulations that are your guardrails, right? It's showing them the job description. It's showing them the charge. It's showing how they fit into the organizations. It's showing them the SOPs. It's showing them the schedule. It's showing them where there is the portal they'll be using. Onboarding, though, and someone mentioned it's about creating the culture. Onboarding is helping them see, understand, and appreciate and live up to the norms. It's about helping them understand how the group navigates, how the group gets stuff done. It's about talking about, like, when we're going through a topic, this is the process that we follow. A huge part of this is having something that we refer to as community agreements. A huge part of this is helping the chair and the group come together to say, what are our norms? What is our agreement individually and collectively to each other? In fact, a great opener for a committee is to start them off by saying, what do we see as the principles that are going to guide our work? And when you do an iterative process like this and you help them put together that community agreement, it gives buy-in, it helps them see and begin to experience the norms, and it really sets up the group to be a team, and it sets up you in a wonderful place to be able to support the chair when you need to deal with disruptive or disengaged volunteers. So a large part of what we're talking about in this first role is really being that go-to person that can get the team thinking and acting as a team. Now, training is skill development and knowledge building. Training is a combination of, are there skills or knowledge that this group needs to collectively, as a peer group, learn? But it's also about the skills and the knowledge they need to be successful as volunteers and volunteer leaders. When you have a disengaged or a disruptive volunteer, and you can address that from a question of what kinds of things do you feel like you don't know or you'd like to know more about, or where would you like to have your skills built? Now you're becoming a problem solver that can course correct a volunteer. So the key resource, it's about setting up the team, your chair, and indeed your relationship with that team for success. Thoughts in chat. Questions, observations. How are you already doing this? Giving you some time to process. All right. I'll keep going. You guys keep talking. Second element, subject matter expert. This is a subject matter expertise on associations, on your specific organization, and on your volunteer group. I lean on this in a big way as perhaps one of the most important roles you can do. I'm not asking you under this to be the subject matter expert on the content or the issue that you all are guiding or leading, but rather on the association and how the work is being done and how associations in general are addressing that topic. Our volunteers are subject matter experts in and of themselves in their own content, whether it's a trade or a professional organization. You have to establish yourself as a subject matter expert that they can lean on for knowledge, expertise, and experience. When you are the subject matter expert and you have to bring a conversation around, say, on a new thing about about how people are engaging with associations, your ability to be that thought leader for the group to help them readjust their thinking is powerful. So being a subject matter expert on the association, on your association and the volunteers group charge allows you to put yourself in as a partner and be able to build the trust, but also to be able to guide the organization in different ways. Yes, Emily, thank you. That sounds great. And yes, Julia, norms and culture are hard to articulate for new people. That's why assuming something like the group getting together to put together their own community agreement is a norm or a culture in action. It actually allows them to see it and to experience it. Being a subject matter expert, by the way, how many of you put in chat have your CAE? I know I can see that Emily has CAE next to hers. Being a CAE can really support you in being perceived as a subject matter expert. Okay, you're also the work navigator. Now, the work navigator I call it work navigator, and I'll tell you why. It is about project management, but it's really about being a guide for your volunteer. And you all have already articulated the difference between a work navigator and a true project manager is that we don't own the project. We own, though, in many cases, the process. We own getting them over the line. We own the ability to support this as a positive experience. But as a navigator, we're able to provide clarity around the charge. We're able to use project trackers. We're able to coach when they hit bumps. We're able to help them understand how to make good decisions. We're able to troubleshoot. We should know the techniques for decision making, from majority versus consensus, from input versus decision making, for using techniques like fist to five. All of this is important. They need it in order to stay on process. And as long as you understand that you're not about making the decisions, you can get a great deal more authority in terms of being able to support them in the decision-making process. Own your role, absolutely. Community builder. I think this is one of the ones that is underrated. This is about connecting people, ideas, and experiences. I want to tell you that there is one person on this call who I know does a pretty cool job on this. And because she was my staff liaison back when I was on the ASAE Component Relations Council. Wanda had just an innate way of remembering our little things and telling people about it in the middle of a meeting, saying, "Oh, I know that so-and-so, did you know so-and-so did such and such?" there was just this connection point that really helped us all build the community. So connecting people is very important. It means that I'm going to push you to get to know your volunteers. You may be liaison for 3 or 4 committees. I get that. And you're like, Peggy, that's 60 people I have to get to know. Yep, that's right. 60 people you have to get to know. Do you have to know everything about them? No. Do you have to know things that might have similarity across the group? Absolutely. I, when I was working as a staffer, and even when I was with a PRSA as their executive director, PRSA Maryland, I would do one-on-one calls with my volunteers. Takes a couple of minutes. Yes, I realize it's a lot. This is one of those ones I'm going to push you on. You cannot build a community if you don't know the people in the community. So when you know them, now you can connect them. Now you can take these 2 people and pull them aside. If you see someone really struggling to get their voice, and you see somebody who seems to really understand how to interact and connect into it, get the 2 of them talking and sharing how to make it a better positive experience. If you find somebody that feels like they really are quiet, find out something about them. And if you know that they love music and this person over here likes music, bring them together, because then the one person will naturally turn to the other and bring their voice in. Being that community builder is really, really important. I love when someone on here said, I want to let them get to the fun. This is about also helping them have fun. So you're absolutely right. All right, I've gone through 4 of them. I've got one more to share with you. Tell me what's coming up for you. I see Barbara has put a question in. Barbara, love this question. Hoping that to see some people maybe that have had some experience with this, throw this in. I'm thinking, I know we had somebody from IFMA, which has got, I think, a very diverse group, because you're outside the country as well. What are successful communication techniques others have used? I will tell you 2 things that I've heard in the past. First of all, is as part of your intake to actually talk to people about communication preferences, to talk about communication preferences, to talk about what kinds of communication techniques they like or that make them feel uncomfortable. In other words, having an open conversation with folks as you form a group. The second thing I heard, and this was really great, as part of a volunteer leadership training, they brought in I'm going to get the word wrong. Maybe Christine can help me, but a person who helped people with cross-cultural communications, like the kind of the White House person who is in charge of making sure everybody knows everything they need to know about the cultures of the people in the room. Anyway, they had a session on that for the volunteers. I thought that that was perhaps one of the coolest, most different things, because we brought it right up there and we lifted it up. The protocol. Yes, Mary Kay, thank you. You knew exactly what I was going for. I can always know there's going to be people that are on my team on every call that I go on to. So I just think it's really interesting that if we can identify some of the nuances about our own organizations, if we could talk to enough volunteers and find out what rubs them wrong, or talk to people that are really quiet, now we can begin to have training that could be really responding to a whole lot of issues that are going unmet. And I think that that's certainly one example of that Barbara has brought to us. I like that.
And Peggy, I just want to put a plug in for all of this technology. While, we may feel like technology is a little less personal, it really does enable people to come together with different communication styles. So right here in this room, you can use the raise your hand feature. You can use the chat. You can simply unmute yourself. Knowing that we all have different communication styles is the first step. Taking the best avenue, if that's technology or in person, you really make the most of what's available to you. So, don't despair about technology. It can help in some places, in some cases.
I'm glad you brought that up, Christine, because one of the biggest things that we saw in both of those research projects, mutually beneficial and in holistic, was volunteers complaining about not knowing where to get stuff and they didn't have things organized. And that's where technology comes in, right? Is it really helps us. And when you have a volunteer that has to miss a meeting, for them to know exactly where I'm going to go and to be able to connect and catch up is priceless. Absolutely priceless. Any other questions on these four? And thank you, Barbara, for putting that question out there. I think it's a really a critical question, critical for us to think about. The fifth element that I want to talk about is ear for the organization. And I want to highlight this one because we have an incredibly powerful job to support both the organization and to support the volunteers by being what I call is the closer of the loop. um, we have this incredible opportunity to both we're in the room with the volunteers. We hear what they're saying. We understand their frustrations, particularly if you and a number of your staff liaison folks get together and talk about it, and you're seeing some challenges or you're seeing some questions that come up over and over again. Take that and feed it back to the staff. Let the organization know that this is what's happening. If you hear an issue come up that's a thorny issue that maybe isn't what your committee is about, but you hear this, go ahead, call it out, parking lot it, then make a note to get it into the hands of the staff. Now, it's qualitative, not quantitative, but it's a wonderful way for you to actually become a hero to your internal staff, right? Now they understand that you know and that you listen and you can be a conduit. When the organization is trying to message out something that's a little difficult, maybe it's hitting some real blocks, right? Your ability to clearly articulate that message to your group, particularly in the context of what they must know about it to get their job done, is priceless. So let's say, for example, the organization is doing a strat plan and the word on the street is that they're going to, and I'm going to use this one because this one's happened a couple of times, they're going to get rid of chapters. And all of a sudden you have all these people on your committee, particularly if you have a committee that has some chapter representatives, and they're complaining and complaining and da 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 da. Okay, it's not their job, but you're hearing that. Your ability to be empathetic, to say, I can't answer all the questions, but I can certainly gather your questions, lets them feel heard, allows you to take it back here to get clarification, to come back around. What are you doing? You're being an ear for the organization and you're supporting your staff colleagues. And then think about this. If you as a staff liaison group could get together on a regular basis and share the intel and share how you have managed some of these issues, it's kind of like that saying where when we raise the level of water, all boats rise. All of our committee works, all of our volunteers really just really get more stuff done.
And Peggy, the getting the volunteer liaisons together, I think that will help Emily here with her question about like, is this something I really need to pay attention to, or is this just one squeaky wheel? Yeah, kind of do that cross-referencing with each other really does help for sure.
I was talking with one organization and they do an amazing thing. I think I'm going to say it's every other week. I could be wrong about that, but they have a full staff liaison, all hands on deck, come in and they keep it to like about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. What are you hearing? These are a couple of key messages we need you all to get out. By the way, anybody have any problems you'd like to have some help on? And it has really shifted the way they're approaching. This is an organization that's a lot of committees, so it's really helped them kind of bring folks together. Then another group has they have a part of their, I think it's a SharePoint folder or whatever, but it's more than that because it's kind of like a little bit of a community. The staff liaisons all have access. That's where they put all of the orientation programs, all of the onboarding stuff, all of the resources on dealing with difficult volunteers, et cetera, all that stuff. They put it there, but they can also ask questions of each other. And I know like AGC has done a bunch of this stuff too. We got a couple of AGC people, so maybe you've got some examples. Yeah. So let's I just took my time because I know we don't want to go over
Answer this
time.
question, Peggy. This is important.
Yes. We've already done that in this way, and while hearing your ideas and being open, how can we say we've already done that? Is a great question. And I usually suggest, and we'll be talking about this actually on Thursday quite a bit, it's not for you to say, we've already done that. It's for you to ask the questions that allow you to figure out why they're asking you or suggesting you do it a certain way. So what I usually find, for example, and this is off the cuff, so it may not be the best example, but when we had a board meeting one time, they asked me, that we were talking about a certain process that we were doing with our awards program, and they said, well, we should do it this way. And it was a way that we had done and got rid of because it was so cumbersome, right? And instead of going to them and saying about this process and saying, well, we've done it this way, and this is why we no longer did it, I said to them, why, I'm trying to remember what the exact question was. I said, tell me more about how you would see that process working. And what I was doing was asking them to articulate a little bit more. And what I found out is that they were asking, why don't we do it this way? When really they wanted something else to suggest it together. So my answer is learn how to ask power questions and reply with a question, get a little deeper, and then bring them to an understanding of what has been done. It usually actually closes the conversation more effectively. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. They clearly haven't seen the resource, or more importantly, they saw it and it didn't meet their needs. And so rather than you arguing with them, or not arguing, but trying to tell me you've done it, it's really important to know what it is they're really asking for.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it's kind of walking that fine line between listening. It's like, oh, maybe I do need to shift in some ways because the needs have shifted. And well, we've got a tried and true process. So kind of get the question behind the question, but also be listening carefully. It's a great combination. Those power questions will really help a lot.
All right. We've gone through these, and we want to give some time for Q&A. So let me pull all of these together and remind you that this comes out of the research. The research says that that we have an outside impact on the effectiveness of the volunteer experience. I'm not saying that if a committee fails to meet its needs, that it's our fault. I'm just saying we have the opportunity to be a partner and help move things over the line. And it makes us, I don't know, we just feel better about our job. So if we can listen to research and embrace these roles, I think that you'll have a better time with your job. Now, having said that, I do know that one of the questions that we got from someone was about this idea of, am I using my time effectively? Is my time being well used? Maybe it was a little bit of, I don't feel like this is a good use of my time. But when you look at these 5 things, how does it help you? Do you think it's going to support you in your role? How does this make you think about your role differently? Any thoughts?
You can either pop it into chat or just come on mute and talk if you want. So,
Yeah. I'm going to give them one more poll while they're thinking and then turn it back over to you, Christine.
okay.
Because I'm kind of curious now that we've talked about these. Which of these roles do you want to learn more about? Which of these roles do you want to learn more about? Christine and I always talk about how can we build a community for staff liaisons to really help you all continue to look at these things and think about them. So whatever one of these that you have marked, and 25 of you jumped right in to answer this, so this is great. In chat, tell us maybe what the question is you have about that. Maybe it's what would be your learning objective on that? Like, what do you want to get out of that? So many of you said building community. Is there a pain or a need or a curiosity? What does it mean for you to learn more? Christine and I are here, and we put together this program and the follow-up program largely to get the community of folks working with volunteers talking more and getting more resources out there. So please go ahead and decide this. I got quite a few of you in. Anybody else want to finish the poll? Let me see if I have one more pop. Oh, yes, of course, always one more. Excellent. All right. Let me share what I've got so far, and I'll turn it back over to you, Christine, to help us just have a little bit more conversation. And I'm going to stop sharing the slides as well so that we can get back in on one screen and start talking. It was interesting, Christine, you can see that building community and work navigation are two
They're
that
neck
pop
and neck.
right
Yeah.
up. Yeah. So by the way, if you did not hit one of these, but you have a go-to resource, let's say you have you nail work navigation and you have a resource, throw that in chat. Let's build our own little set of resources for chat. We will share chat, by the way, afterwards. So if there's any resources in here, you will have access to. I'm going to stop the sharing, and it's all you, Christine.
Great. So we started to get at the what else would you like to learn? We've went through a lot of information today about the 5 roles and kind of thinking about owning your own role. What questions do you have? What, when you thought about signing up for this class and, you thought about how it might go, what had you hoped that we would cover that we haven't gotten to that maybe we can get a little, get that itch scratched today before we end here in about 10 minutes. So what else would you like to know more about? What questions do you have? You can either come off mute, you can raise your hand, you can put it into chat, take advantage of all those technology features. We're all feeling pretty good about what we heard today.
So Leanne asks more about power questions. Leanne, we've got I have a resource on the website. I'm not sure if my colleague here, Carol, can find that, but we'll put that in our follow-up to all of you so you can take a look at that. As a note, for those of you that are joining us on Thursday, we're doing a whole exercise on power questions. Really, it's when we as staff liaisons learn how to ask questions, it changes the whole dynamic for all of us.
Yeah, Karen's asking about this, how do you balance building community without taking too much time. Yes, our volunteers are already giving us precious hours out of their busy schedules. You can't afford to not do that, though. I think is the answer is that be kind of strategic and kind of pop in, community building at the beginning of their terms, or their activity, and then kind of reinforce it in little bites so that you have this ongoing sense of community. It is so important to do it that it is worth the time. Is just be really smart and kind of and strategic about it. Peggy, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I wanna highlight something that you do that could easily be translatable or transferable to a committee is brain breaks. When you're doing a facilitation, you will often do brain in the middle of it, just like everybody, we all need to just like, whoo, and you do a brain break. And the brain breaks are really community building. So you could call them brain breaks, you could call them icebreakers that use in the middle of the time. But essentially, what we're talking about is build it in small ways as opposed to having a big thing. So think about in the course of a committee meeting, where are there places I can get them to sort of come together to do something? Are there ways that when I'm starting a conversation around a particular topic, before we make the decision, can we all have a great big whiteboard and talk about what are all the questions we have? So you're, as a community, gathering all of the questions. People are seeing it's easier oftentimes to ask questions. So people are getting to see how the other ones in the group are thinking. And they begin to then get to know people from a different perspective. So it's sometimes how you're doing the facilitation. Sometimes it's a brain break. But then the other element that I think is really valuable is building some training into every committee meeting or committee call. And that could be simply, we're going to talk about X topic and we're going to put a TED talk on that's 5 minutes, and then we're all going to chat about it. So you give something where we're all digesting it together and reacting at this, and reacting then is just a way of getting people talking and seeing each other's other viewpoints.
Peggy, that's got a dual purpose too, is that it's the give back to the volunteers. Like they're giving so much to you in the association, you're giving back to them an interesting topic or a new skill or a new idea. So the doing it together is the community building, but you're also giving them something they can take away to build their skills or their networks or their leadership competencies or whatever it might be. So there's kind of a dual purpose there.
Kelly mentions, and this could be adapted. Kelly talks about the monthly sharing calls on Zoom, which help build the community, not only with them. It takes a little bit off the shoulders because you're building it with each of. It's been a game changer, she's mentioned. But you could do that with your collection of volunteers, right? You
Love that.
could, you could have calls. And if you're a volunteer, come on in. We're gonna just do a water cooler conversation about volunteering with this organization, which could be a great way of pulling people together. I just wanted to highlight that. I also just heard about, and I can't remember the association right now, so I'm gonna have to go back in my notes, apologize. They, when you raise your hand to say, I'm interested in volunteering, they put you in an online community. They call you a volunteer, even if you're not already in the volunteer roles, put you in a community, and this community gets updates, association updates, sometimes before it goes out to all members. That's also building a community.
And Chip, you have a question about taking what you hear from the volunteers and bring it to the leadership to me. Are you concerned that the leadership team would not be receptive to it? Or if you wouldn't mind, tell me a little bit more what's behind that question.
Sure. And yes, I would be concerned that they wouldn't necessarily be receptive to it, but also I hear a great deal of information. How do I discern that down? How do I pick and choose what I should bring forward and when I perhaps should do that as well? I'm probably the staff member who communicates the most with our volunteers in our organization. So I do spend a lot of time in conversation with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we heard that from somebody else earlier. It's like, is it is it more than just the squeaky wheel that I'm hearing, and how do you parse through it? Peggy, I mean, well, we can turn it to the whole group. Anybody have any ideas there? Peggy, if you want to get us started on thoughts, maybe we can all help chip out here.
Yeah, I think if I hear something, if I'm a liaison over here and I hear something, I'm gonna wanna go to the other staff liaisons and sort of get a sense of how is this percolating through? So we get a sense of whether there is actually an importance or a priority to moving that to the next level. I certainly would use that. I would also, though, set up with and maybe this is through, I saw at the beginning, I think you got a couple of people here who are actually in charge of volunteer management. Um, I think that it's valuable for organizations to set up like a monthly update that goes out to the C-suite and key staff that say something like, from our volunteers. And it just lists some cool points that you're hearing. And it does two things. It's an opportunity for you to talk about what they've achieved, which is very important. Because if you need more time to be a really effective staff liaison, it means you've got to get something off your plate. You've got to show the higher ups that your role as a staff liaison is producing results, right? So it's partially that, but it's also partially what our volunteers are talking about when they're not talking about their job, which I think is really valuable. So that's the other thing that I've seen and I think could be useful. From the other folks, how many of you are communicating back to your higher up, so to say, and how are you doing this? How are you filtering information back up again? Or not?
Yeah, it might be something we want to spend some more time on, Peggy, in a future session, is that delicate kind of the grassroots up to the leadership and back, because you are that connecting point, all of you all. So let's put a pin in that, Peggy, and see what we
Yeah.
can come up with a future resource for everybody.
Let me do a shout out to Madeline's question, because I think at the heart of all of this, that is the one I would love us to answer. It is, quite frankly, it's time for us to allow our volunteers to be more innovative. Two things I can think of, and so I would love to hear what other people have to say about this, is go get the book Switch, How to Make Decisions. I think it's How to Make Decisions, but anyway, go get the book Switch, because Switch talks about how to set up conversations that beget new solutions. I love some of the techniques that he talks about this, but I love the key technique, which is you don't have either or decisions. So you want creative thinking? You got to give at least 3 ideas, 3 different ways of approaching something. When you do that, all of a sudden it kind of opens up the creative juices. So get Switch. I think that's really really critical. And secondly is I think we have to give our volunteers more permission. They're busy, so we give this big charge, and then we ask them to get stuff done, and it's easier for them to go to the easy answers. So I think another part of doing this is give them permission to be out of the box and give them permission not to get everything on their charge done.
So Emily just put into the chat, I think you started to come off mute, Emily, so thank you for putting that into chat, that you guys are launching a system. We would love to hear from you how that goes. So do keep us informed on that feedback loop, because that is so important. So Peggy, I think we're out of time, sadly.
Yes,
we wanted to hear from everybody, but these go so fast. So, for those of you that we're going to see on Thursday for the in-person session in Arlington, we can't wait to spend the day with you. For everybody else, thank you, thank you, thank you for taking the time out of your schedules today. Keep the questions coming. We will kind of go through them, and as we loop back to you after the session, if we have any other tips or tidbits, we'll certainly share those with you. Peggy, anything else to close us out?
The only thing I will say is, Kathy, we'll get back to you. That's an important question. 8 to 4 is important, but we also have to find a way to respond to our volunteers between 4 and 8. So we've got some thoughts, and I'll get that to you. Yeah, thank you. How? Gosh, this time went so fast. Anything we can do for you, let us know. You will get recording. You will get chat. You will get a resource list, and you will have Christine and my contact information. And some of you will see you on Thursday.
Call us anytime, reach out. We love talking volunteers. Thanks, everybody.